Early morning light stretched across Fort Campbell as Staff Sergeant Maria Rodriguez walked toward the fitness training area, her boots tapped steadily on the pavement. Fellow soldiers were already warming up and getting ready for their daily workout that would push their bodies to the limit. Maria moved more slowly than normal, keeping her left arm tight against her side. The familiar throbbing in her shoulder brought back memories of that horrific evening in Afghanistan 2 years earlier. She'd been working as a battlefield medic when her group's vehicles struck a hidden bomb. The explosion hurled her into their armored truck, causing injuries that still hurt today. Colonel Harrison stood before the group, his hard eyes looking over the assembled soldiers. Everyone on base knew him for his strict standards and demanding nature. The colonel insisted every soldier stay in top shape, no exceptions. He had zero tolerance for what he viewed as weakness or people making up reasons to avoid work. When soldiers formed lines for morning drills, Maria positioned herself in the back. She attempted to stretch her damaged arm, but stabbing pain made her grimace. Medical staff had warned her that her shoulder would never work properly again after the operation. Now metal pieces and bolts kept her bones connected where flying debris had ripped through flesh and bone. "Pay attention, everyone," Colonel Harrison shouted. "We're running the combat fitness evaluation today. Push-ups, sit-ups, and a 2-mile race. I won't listen to whining or sad tales. You all chose to become fighters, so prove it." Maria's stomach knotted with anxiety. She understood push-ups would be nearly impossible with her damaged shoulder. The rehabilitation exercises had provided some relief, but she still couldn't raise her arm overhead without terrible pain. She had official paperwork allowing her to perform adjusted exercises, but she'd never presented it to Colonel Harrison. When the order came to start push-ups, Maria got down on the ground like everyone else. She tried lowering her body, but her left shoulder instantly flooded her with sharp agony. She barely completed a few partial movements before stopping, gasping from the struggle and discomfort. Colonel Harrison spotted her right away. He marched over to where Maria fought on the ground. His expression showed fury and letdown as he stared at her. The other soldiers kept exercising, though many peeked at the scene unfolding. "Rodriguez, what's your problem?" the colonel barked. "Are you actually putting in effort? This is embarrassing. I've watched new recruits do better on day one." Maria attempted to keep going, but her shoulder refused to work. She tried another push-up but crumpled midway. Sweat formed on her face, not from the workout, but from the crushing pain racing through her arm and back. "Sir, I have a health issue that impacts my push-up ability." Maria spoke softly, trying to stay professional despite feeling humiliated before her peers. Colonel Harrison's face grew harder. He'd heard similar claims before and typically brushed them off as excuses to skip difficult training. Based on his years of service, most soldiers claiming medical issues were simply seeking an easy escape from physical workouts. "A health issue?" he echoed, his tone thick with doubt. "Let me take a wild guess. You have a hangnail or a headache. Perhaps your back aches from your pillow." Several soldiers shifted awkwardly, feeling the building conflict. They recognized Maria as a committed soldier who'd deployed overseas, but they also understood Colonel Harrison's harsh approach toward anyone he thought was weak or excuse-making. Maria's face burned with embarrassment and anger. She wanted to talk about Afghanistan, the bombing, the endless months of medical procedures and therapy, but military rules demanded she respect her superior officer, even when he acted unfairly. "Sir, I possess official records from medical personnel about my restrictions," she stated, her voice calm despite her inner chaos. Colonel Harrison folded his arms and shook his head disapprovingly. He'd already formed his opinion about the situation. To him, this appeared like just another soldier avoiding hard work. The morning atmosphere grew heavy as the argument escalated. Fellow soldiers had quit their exercises to observe what was happening. Maria stayed on the ground, unable to finish the push-ups, but also unable to properly defend herself without appearing to make excuses. Colonel Harrison gazed down at Maria with mounting irritation. His 2 decades in uniform had shown him numerous soldiers attempting to dodge responsibilities with various complaints and medical excuses. In his view, Maria was another person seeking the easy path away from physical training. "Documentation," he said with a cruel chuckle. "I'm not interested in your forms, Rodriguez. What matters to me are outcomes. Either you're capable of performing or you're not. Currently, it appears you're not." Maria pushed herself upright, her injured shoulder pounding with every motion. She sensed her fellow soldiers watching, some with compassion and others with interest. She'd always taken pride in her military achievements and work capability, but right now, she felt degraded before everyone. The colonel pressed his verbal attack, his voice rising so the entire training area could hear. This represents everything wrong with the modern military. Soldiers believe they can arrive and do bare minimum work. They demand special accommodations for every minor discomfort. While he talked, Maria recalled the night that transformed her life forever. She could still sense the blast that tore through their vehicle group in Afghanistan. She remembered awakening in the military medical center, unable to shift her left arm. Doctors had said she was fortunate to survive, though she sometimes questioned whether fortunate described it accurately. I've performed this role longer than many of you have lived, Colonel Harrison went on. I've witnessed genuine warriors, soldiers who pushed through actual wounds to finish their assignments. They didn't create excuses or request special handling. Maria felt rage building in her core. She had endured genuine wounds. She'd rescued lives while her own body was shattered and bleeding. She'd earned every recognition and award on her uniform through dedication and bravery this colonel couldn't comprehend. Yet military discipline kept her silent. She stood straight, her jaw tight while the colonel kept insulting her before the whole formation. The ache in her shoulder seemed to worsen with her rising stress, shooting sharp jolts down her arm. Listen to me, Rodriguez, the colonel said, moving nearer. I'm unconcerned if you carry a doctor's letter saying you can't do push-ups. I'm unconcerned if you possess some tale about getting wounded. What concerns me is whether you'll contribute to this unit or simply drag us down. The other soldiers fidgeted uncomfortably. Many knew Maria's background as a battlefield medic who'd served admirably overseas. They'd heard accounts of her courage under attack and her commitment to saving injured soldiers. However, they also knew better than to challenge a colonel during a public confrontation. Maria's hands started trembling from combined anger and stress hormones. She reflected on all the evenings she'd devoted to physical rehabilitation, struggling to recover even limited shoulder function. She remembered the operations, the complications, the endless months of healing. She thought about the soldiers whose lives she'd preserved while her own body fell apart. Colonel Harrison seemed to mistake her shaking for nervousness or fragility. His expression became even more scornful as he prepared to deliver what he believed would destroy her reputation completely. You know what I believe, Rodriguez. I believe you're a coward. I believe you're inventing some fake medical reason to dodge your responsibilities. I believe you represent exactly the type of soldier who damages the rest of our reputation. The word coward struck Maria like a physical hit. She'd been labeled many things throughout her military journey, but never that. She'd rushed toward threats when others fled. She'd risked her own survival to rescue others. She'd gained the admiration of every soldier she'd worked alongside through her bravery and commitment. Something within her broke. She'd attempted to manage this situation with grace and respect for military customs. She'd tried explaining her limitations without diving into the agonizing details of her wound. But being labeled a coward by someone who'd never experienced genuine warfare was unbearable. The training area fell completely silent except for Maria's heavy breathing. The climbing sun kept rising, creating longer shadows on the ground where countless soldiers stood frozen, anticipating what would occur next. The pressure in the atmosphere felt almost solid. Colonel Harrison stood with folded arms, a pleased smile on his face. He assumed he'd dominated this confrontation and positioned a disrespectful soldier in her rightful place. He anticipated Maria would apologize, generate more justifications, or simply retreat in humiliation, but he had zero clue what Maria was preparing to do next. Maria remained perfectly motionless for a long pause, her chest moving with measured breaths. The word coward rang in her thoughts, hurting more intensely than any physical suffering she'd experienced. She stared straight into Colonel Harrison's eyes, and for the first instant since the confrontation started, her look transformed from respectful submission to something completely different. Without uttering a sound, Maria lifted her hands and started unzipping her military workout jacket. The zipper sound seemed impossibly loud in the abrupt quiet that had blanketed the training area. Colonel Harrison observed with bewilderment, not grasping what she was doing or why she was removing her jacket when he'd been criticizing her. The other soldiers stretched their necks to witness what was unfolding. Some who'd served with Maria overseas started understanding what she was preparing to show. Their expressions displayed a blend of anticipation and worry, knowing the colonel was about to discover something that would alter everything. As Maria pulled her arms from the jacket sleeves, she flinched slightly from moving her damaged shoulder, but she pressed forward with focused determination, folding the jacket carefully and placing it on the ground next to her. She now stood wearing her basic military workout shirt, a plain gray top that she typically kept covered during physical training. Colonel Harrison's assured smile started disappearing as he noticed what was displayed on Maria's arms and shoulders. Through the thin material of her workout shirt, dark marks and patches were obviously visible across her skin, but these weren't tattoos or ordinary marks. They were something far more meaningful. Maria then did something that stunned everyone watching. She grasped the bottom edge of her workout shirt and raised it upward, revealing her torso to everyone on the training grounds. The collective gasps and sudden breathing from the observing soldiers were clearly audible across the whole space. Her body revealed a narrative that words could never properly express. Surgical marks crossed her shoulder and back in exact lines where military surgeons had labored to reconstruct her. But more disturbing than the surgical marks were the additional scars covering her skin. These were the clear signs of shrapnel damage, burn wounds, and the crushing injuries that resulted from standing too close to a blast. The biggest scar traced from her left shoulder blade downward to her ribs, a thick, elevated strip of tissue that indicated a wound that almost ended her life. Smaller scars covered her back and shoulder, each one a testament to the metal pieces that had penetrated her body when the hidden explosive erupted beneath her convoy. Colonel Harrison's complexion went totally pale. His mouth parted slightly, but no sound emerged. He'd anticipated seeing perhaps a minor surgical mark or possibly some small injury that Maria was overstating. Instead, he faced the body of a fighter who'd literally been ripped apart by hostile fire and reconstructed through multiple operations. The training area was so hushed that the sound of breeze through the nearby trees seemed deafeningly loud. Every soldier present stared at Maria's visible scars, immediately grasping what they witnessed. These weren't the marks of someone who'd dodged danger or sought comfortable assignment. These were the battle wounds of someone who'd confronted the worst warfare could deliver and lived through it. Maria stood upright and confident despite being partially exposed before countless people. Her scars captured the morning sunlight, making the raised tissue appear even more striking against her skin. She looked straight at Colonel Harrison, her eyes containing a quiet strength that demanded respect. "These scars come from Afghanistan, sir," she stated, her voice clear and unwavering. "I was operating as a battlefield medic with the 82nd Airborne when our convoy triggered a hidden bomb. The explosion launched me against our armored truck and filled my body with metal fragments." She turned slightly to display the complete scope of her wounds, indicating different scars as she elaborated. "This scar marks where they extracted a metal piece that was mere inches from my heart. This one shows where they rebuilt my shoulder blade after it shattered. These smaller ones represent the countless metal fragments they removed from my back and arms." Colonel Harrison stood paralyzed, unable to speak or shift. He was starting to grasp that he'd committed a horrible error, but the complete burden of his mistake hadn't yet struck him. He was still absorbing the visual proof of Maria's dedication and service. Maria kept speaking, her voice strengthening with each statement. "The doctors informed me I'd never recover full shoulder function. They said I was lucky to preserve my arm whatsoever. I devoted 8 months in military medical facilities and recovery centers, relearning how to control my body again." The other soldiers started whispering among themselves, some nodding with acknowledgement and admiration. Several soldiers who deployed overseas carried their own scars and grasped precisely what Maria had survived. They understood the lengthy recovery journey that accompanied such devastating wounds. "I didn't select getting injured, sir," Maria said, still focused on the colonel. "But I also didn't select quitting when it occurred. I selected fighting my way back to active service because I believe in serving my nation and my fellow soldiers." The silence on the training area continued as Colonel Harrison wrestled to absorb what he witnessed and heard. His complexion had shifted from pale to crimson as the complete impact of his error started registering. He just labeled a combat veteran a coward before countless soldiers, and now he stared at the physical proof of heroism and dedication. Maria kept standing with her shirt raised, ensuring everyone could observe the complete extent of her battle wounds. She wasn't doing this for dramatic effect or sympathy. She was establishing a point about service, dedication, and the genuine meaning of bravery. Each scar on her body represented a moment when she'd selected duty over security. "On the evening I was wounded," Maria went on, her voice projecting across the silent training area, I was caring for 3 injured soldiers when the hidden bomb exploded. Even following the blast, even with my own wounds, I kept providing medical assistance until the rescue helicopters touched down. I preserved 2 lives that evening, while metal pieces were still lodged in my own body. Some soldiers who'd served in war zones nodded knowingly. They grasped the disorder and terror of such moments when training and duty overcome pain and fear. They recognized the type of courage Maria was describing, the kind that couldn't be invented or overstated. Colonel Harrison finally discovered his voice, but it emerged as hardly more than a murmur. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, I didn't realize. He stopped speaking, unable to finish his thought. For the first occasion in his military journey, he was totally speechless. Maria slowly dropped her shirt, concealing her scars but not the impact they'd created on everyone watching. She retrieved her workout jacket and started putting it back on, each action cautious and purposeful. The ache in her shoulder remained present, would always remain present. But she'd established her point. Sir, I've never requested special handling, she stated, as she zipped her jacket. I possess medical documentation that permits adjusted physical training drills, but I keep serving in every way that I'm capable. I've never employed my wounds as justification to dodge my responsibility. The colonel's hands trembled slightly as he grasped the enormity of what had just occurred. He'd publicly degraded a decorated combat veteran based on his own biases and incorrect assumptions. News of this event would travel throughout the base within hours, and his standing would never bounce back from such a serious leadership failure. Other soldiers on the training area started shifting and murmuring among themselves. Many gazed at Colonel Harrison with looks that ranged from letdown to outright revulsion. They just observed him label a genuine war hero a coward, and they wouldn't forget it quickly. Sergeant First Class Johnson, who'd completed 2 deployments in Afghanistan himself, stepped forward from the formation. His action shattered the trance of silence that had held everyone motionless. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez served with excellence in my unit overseas, he announced loudly enough for everyone to hear. She's one of the finest soldiers I've ever had the honor to serve beside. His statement seemed to authorize other soldiers to shift and speak. Additional voices started rising from the formation, soldiers sharing their own awareness of Maria's service background and character. The atmosphere on the training area was changing dramatically, and not in Colonel Harrison's benefit. She extracted me from a blazing vehicle in Kandahar, shouted Specialist Martinez, transported me to safety even though she was wounded herself. She rescued my life twice during one deployment, contributed Corporal Williams, best battlefield medic in the entire war zone. Colonel Harrison listened to these accounts with increasing dread and shame. Each favorable remark about Maria's service made his own actions seem more unforgivable. He'd been so concentrated on what he viewed as weakness that he'd totally overlooked the strength and courage standing directly before him. Maria stood quietly while her fellow soldiers defended her. She hadn't sought their backing, but she appreciated it deeply. These were the individuals who genuinely knew her, who'd witnessed her in action when lives hung in the balance. Their views mattered more to her than any criticism from someone who'd never faced genuine combat. The morning sun kept climbing, throwing new shadows across the training area. What had begun as a standard physical training meeting had transformed into something far more important. It had become a moment of judgment, where assumptions were tested and genuine character was displayed. Colonel Harrison stood in the center of everything, knowing he needed to say something to address what had transpired. But he also understood that anything he stated at this moment would ring empty and insufficient. He'd exposed his own biases and terrible judgment in the most public manner possible. The harm was complete, and there would be outcomes that extended far beyond the single morning on the training area. Colonel Harrison stood in the middle of the training area, surrounded by soldiers who no longer regarded him with the automatic respect his rank typically received. Instead, their expressions displayed letdown, fury, and diminished faith in his leadership. He could sense his authority vanishing with each passing second. The accounts from Maria's fellow soldiers had ceased, but the damage to his standing was obviously visible in every face surrounding him. He'd committed a basic error in judgment, one that exposed serious weaknesses in his character and leadership capability. Military leaders were supposed to understand their soldiers, to comprehend their abilities and restrictions, and to lead with intelligence and fairness. Maria completed adjusting her workout jacket and stood at attention, awaiting what the colonel would do next. Despite everything that had just transpired, she kept her military composure and displayed appropriate respect for his rank. Her grace in this moment made Colonel Harrison's earlier actions seem even more disgraceful in comparison. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, the colonel started, his voice much softer than it had been earlier. I'm indebted to you for an apology. I formed assumptions about your circumstances without collecting the facts, and I addressed you in a manner that was totally wrong. His words were accurate, but they rang empty and forced to everyone listening. Maria simply nodded recognition without speaking. She'd accomplished her objective of protecting her honor and service background, but she felt no satisfaction in the colonel's obvious distress. The other soldiers kept watching this remarkable scene develop. In their combined military background, none had ever witnessed a colonel forced to publicly apologize to a lower-ranking soldier. The authority dynamic on the training area had reversed totally, and everyone present grasped the importance of what they were observing. Colonel Harrison cleared his throat and attempted to recover some control over the circumstances. All soldiers will resume with the planned physical training drills. Those with medical documentation should follow their adjusted routines as directed by medical staff. But his effort to restore normal activities fell flat. The soldiers started their exercises automatically without the typical energy and drive. The event had thrown a shadow over the whole training session, and everyone could sense the pressure that still filled the air. As the morning advanced, word of what had occurred started traveling beyond the training area. Soldiers discussed during breaks, sharing the account with others who hadn't observed it directly. By midday, everyone on the base had learned about Colonel Harrison's confrontation with Staff Sergeant Rodriguez and how terribly it had turned out for him. The account expanded and changed as it traveled, but the essential facts stayed the same. A respected combat veteran had been publicly degraded by a colonel who'd formed incorrect assumptions about her character and service. When she displayed her battle wounds, it became obvious that she'd given more for her nation than most soldiers ever would. In the base leadership center, other officers started hearing the reports of what had occurred during morning workouts. General Morrison, the base leader, requested a complete briefing on the event. He'd known Maria Rodriguez by reputation as an exceptional soldier and medic, and he felt deeply troubled about what he was learning. Meanwhile, Maria returned to her standard responsibilities, attempting to move past the morning's events, but she struggled to focus on routine tasks. The confrontation had revived memories of her time in Afghanistan, both the traumatic moments of her injury and the pride she felt in her service and dedication. Her fellow soldiers treated her with even greater respect than typical, if that was conceivable. They visited her workspace throughout the day to provide backing and to share their own reactions about what had occurred. Many expressed admiration for how she'd managed such a challenging situation with grace and courage. Colonel Harrison, meanwhile, devoted the day in his office, with his door shut. He understood that his career had suffered a serious blow, and he was attempting to determine how to fix the damage. But deeply he grasped that some errors couldn't be reversed. His terrible judgment and biased assumptions had been revealed in the most public manner conceivable. By nightfall, the event had captured the focus of military leadership far beyond Fort Campbell. Accounts like this one traveled rapidly through military networks, particularly when they highlighted concerns of leadership, respect for veterans, and the handling of wounded fighters. The effects were just starting to emerge, and they would reach far beyond a single morning's physical training session. What had begun as a standard drill had become a defining moment that would be remembered and talked about for years ahead. Maria went to sleep that night knowing she'd defended herself and all the soldiers who'd been wounded serving their nation. She demonstrated that genuine strength wasn't measured by push-up ability, but by the readiness to give everything for duty, honor, and fellow soldiers. 2 weeks following the event on the training area, the outcomes of Colonel Harrison's actions had spread through the whole military leadership structure. General Morrison had finished his investigation into what occurred, questioning countless witnesses and examining Maria's complete service background and medical record. The investigation disclosed that Maria Rodriguez wasn't only a decorated combat veteran, but also one of the most highly respected soldiers on the base. Her service background included 2 Purple Hearts, a Bronze Star for courage, and praise from multiple commanding officers who celebrated her commitment and heroism under attack. Colonel Harrison was summoned into General Morrison's office on a Thursday morning. The meeting was short and straightforward. The general told him that his treatment toward Staff Sergeant Rodriguez was totally unacceptable and revealed a serious absence of judgment and leadership capability. Colonel General Morrison stated, his voice steady and disappointed, "Your actions have harmed the confidence and trust of the soldiers under your leadership. More significantly, you publicly degraded a wounded fighter who's given more to this nation than most people can fathom. The outcomes were quick and hard. Colonel Harrison was removed from his leadership position immediately and transferred to an office role pending an official assessment of his fitness for ongoing service. His military career, which had once appeared bright, was now effectively finished. News of the colonel's removal from leadership traveled through Fort Campbell as rapidly as the original account had. Soldiers throughout the base felt a sense of fairness had been achieved, and their trust in military leadership was partially rebuilt by witnessing that wrong behavior had genuine outcomes. Maria was summoned to General Morrison's office the same day. She entered with some worry, uncertain what to anticipate from this meeting with such a high-ranking officer, but the general's initial words relaxed her. "Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, I want to personally apologize for what you experienced." General Morrison stated, "Your service and dedication deserve nothing except respect and acknowledgement, not the treatment you received from Colonel Harrison." The general continued to tell Maria that she was being evaluated for advancement to Sergeant First Class, acknowledging both her exceptional service background and her composure under pressure during the challenging event. He also mentioned that the Army was examining policies to guarantee that wounded fighters received suitable backing and accommodation for their service-related wounds. In the months afterward, Maria's account became recognized throughout the military community as an illustration of genuine courage and grace. She was invited to present at military gatherings about the obstacles faced by wounded veterans and the significance of understanding and backing soldiers who'd been wounded in warfare. The event also prompted changes in how physical training was handled on military bases. New standards were created, requiring leaders to become familiar with the medical documentation and service backgrounds of their soldiers before forming judgments about their abilities or drive. Maria kept her service with excellence, eventually gaining advancement to Sergeant First Class and later to Master Sergeant. She became a guide to younger soldiers, particularly those who'd been wounded in warfare, helping them handle the obstacles of recovery and ongoing service. Years later, when Maria was questioned about that morning on the training area, she would state that it was one of the most challenging but significant moments of her military career. It had pushed her to face the biases and misunderstandings that wounded veterans sometimes encountered, even within the military community itself. She never felt satisfaction in Colonel Harrison's downfall, understanding that his error stemmed from lack of knowledge rather than cruelty. But she was proud that her actions had prompted positive changes that would help other wounded fighters who followed after her. The account of Maria Rodriguez became a teaching resource in military leadership courses, demonstrating the significance of understanding your soldiers, preventing assumptions, and treating everyone with respect and honor. It functioned as a powerful reminder that genuine strength originates not from physical perfection, but from courage, commitment, and the readiness to serve others. The scars on Maria's body never completely healed, and the ache in her shoulder stayed a constant reminder of her service in Afghanistan. But those same scars had also become representations of her courage and dedication, proof that she'd earned the right to be labeled a warrior in every meaning of the word. Her account motivated countless other veterans who battled with both visible and invisible wounds from their service. It revealed to them that their dedication mattered, that their ongoing service was appreciated, and that they deserved respect regardless of the physical restrictions their wounds might create. The training area where it all started kept being used for daily physical training drills, but now it was also remembered as the location where a wounded fighter stood up for herself and all veterans who'd paid the price of freedom with their blood, effort, and dedication.